Welcome to this video where I'm going to show you a way how we can make bilateral communication between our Blazor components happening. With bilateral communication, I mean that here in the fetch data component, we click on a row, it gets added to the car component, and the car component can then return an object. In this case, it's a message saying that adding another product to the car component would exceed the predefined limit. How do we make this all work? We have to install two packages. MediatR, it has all the base types defined and also the interfaces that we're then going to implement. And the package here, extensions Microsoft dependency injection, it has one method defined that whenever we call it, it conveniently registers all needed types to the inversion of control container to make MediatR work. Therefore, we have to import two namespaces, MediatR and system reflection. System reflection is needed to give MediatR the assembly in which we then define objects that implement the interfaces that MediatR defines. Here we are retrieving the currently executing assembly, and of course in this assembly we are then implementing MediatR's interfaces. Here in the imports Blazor file, I'm using MediatR, which makes it available, or which imports a namespace for all Blazor components, and then I'm injecting an object of type MediatR into all the Blazor components. Here in the main layout, I'm modifying the top row, so instead of the about link, we are adding the car component. The car component is defined here. I'm styling it directly in the component, give it a bit of padding, specify the width, define the border, and to display its children, so the elements inside of car container, I'm using Flexbox. By default it will lay out everything in a row. Align items with align items we can specify the vertical alignment. In this case everything is getting pushed to the bottom, and justify content specifies the horizontal alignment. Because we have two children of the core container, these children will be on the left hand and on the right hand side. So that's the first children here, or element here, it's a shopping cart icon, and the second one here is the price of all products. Here I'm using string formatting, C for currency. Here I have defined a private list which will have all the products. Here on initialize that I override, we initialize the products collection to a new list, and then we are subscribing to the product added event. Now you may ask yourselves, where is this event defined? I will give you the answer in a second. I'm implementing iDisposable, so whenever the component is disposed, we are unsubscribing from the product added event, and the add product method takes in also expects two parameters. First one indicating the object that has broadcasted the event, so that's the sender of the event, and the second one is a custom event args, the add to basket event args, which has one property defined. It's of type product, so here we are using retrieving the property and then adding it to the product selection, and call status changed so that the UI is getting updated. So where is the product added event defined? It's in the add product to car command file. Here I have marked the car component class with the partial keyword, and to make partial classes work they have to be defined in the same namespace. Therefore I'm explicitly defining the namespace here, so that's the same namespace as the car component is defined in, and the partial class allows us to split up the definition of a class into separate files. One file is here and the other one is in form of the Blazor component. Now here we are implementing a request handler. That's an interface that MediatR defines. Here we are specifying the first generic type parameter to be add product to card command, and the second one to be the add product to card response. To implement this interface, this means that we need to define a method that is called handle that takes in the command of this type and also a cancellation token, but because we don't use any IO operations, we don't need to care, and we have to produce a task of the add product to card response. Where are these commands and responses defined? They are up here. So the add product to card command is getting send whenever we want to add a product to the cart. It implements iRequest. Here, generic type parameter, we have specified a response that the object has to produce that is handling the send add product to cart commands. Here it has just one property, product. A product has a name and a price, and a response has a property indicating if it has succeeded the operations of adding it to the cart, and a message. And here we have our event args. They are inheriting or extending the base class event args, and again have a product. Now here the product added event, exactly. So it's marked as static. Why static? Because whenever an add product to cart command is getting sent, MediatR initializes or creates a new, or instantiates, creates a new cart component that is then, that on this component, this method is getting called. And so if I would, if I don't mark it as static, it would only live for the duration of the newly created cart component. But because the duration is very short-lived, because it only needs to execute this method, I have to mark it as static to have it longer-lived. And then the cart component can subscribe to it. Now in the handle method here, we are just checking the total price of all the items that have been added. Here I'm using link or language integrated query to sum the price, and then also adding the price of the item that we want to add. If it's smaller than 200, we are invoking the event here with the Elvis operator to check if it's not null. If it's not null, we are invoking it. This, which means the current object, and then here we are creating a new event args, and we just pass the product that we have received. Then we are adding it to the product to cart commands. Here the same thing. I have marked it as static too, so that it lives as long as the application is open in the user's browser. And if it's bigger than 200, we are returning a response that indicates we couldn't have added. Now you may ask yourself, why do we need here the product added? Because I have defined it as a partial class. So what I can do is here just say add product to cart commands and just call it from here. I wanted to be a bit more explicit by using this event here, so that if I just see this component here, it's a bit more intuitive. Okay, we have here the product added event and we are subscribing to it. If from here I would use the add product to carts command, I think in my experience it makes it a bit messy, because we don't have a clear overview over where this private field or this field comes from. So here I've chosen to be a bit more explicit with the product added event, but I also understand the voices which say maybe it's a bit bloated, the whole approach. Now I've spoken a lot about the iRequest handler that handles the product cart commands whenever they are getting sent. And where is this happening? This is happening in fetch data component. Because the send method is asynchronous, I can await it, and then here I'm creating a new add product to cart command. The product will just have its price property defined, which will be the temperature of the forecast, and then the result is getting stored in this private field of type add product to cart response, and according to its values we are rendering this markup here, which indicates the message. So I hope I could have shown you a way how we can make bilateral communication happening in Blazor. The heart of the whole approach lays in the partial class cart component here. Thank you very much for your attention.